Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. My guest this week is Scott Butler. Scott worked in the video game industry, but not as an actor, as an animator and programmer, and now he has transitioned into acting. And he has an incredible story to share with you all and some really cool experiences that he's had doing a lot of character work. And I'm not talking about character acting, I'm talking about character monster work. Please enjoy Scott Butler. How did you get into this acting business?
It's kind of a weird story. So I've been a video game artist all my life for a very long time. I was offered the job when I was 16, but I took it when I was 17 because I was still doing my exams. My mum was like, you need to finish your exams first before you can do any of that. So I got into games at a very young age, and I've always had a very active imagination. And working in games, of course, always fires that imagination. You're creating characters, you're creating worlds, you're creating stories and stuff like that. And then in 2001, I flew over to the States to see a couple of old friends from England that had moved out to the States a few years prior. And I thought, I want to see the US. I've never seen it and all that kind of stuff. So I come to see them and I'm like, wow, it's an amazing country. And I couldn't believe I was in San Diego and it was sunny in November. And I was like, what? Sun in November? We're lucky to see sun ever in the UK. And it was just like lovely. And then I went back and I jumped forward a little bit. I was actually offered an interview while I was there visiting. And ironically, both of us, myself and my two friends, had all ended up at the same company, different countries. I was art director at PlayStation in London, and they became programmers at PlayStation in San Francisco. And then that office split to San Diego. So they kind of like made two offices and they moved down to San Diego. That's how I ended up there. And so I said, yeah, sure, I'll check out this interview, whatever, So I went to the interview. Cut long story short, I got the job. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm moving to the US. It's crazy. Moved to the US in 2002, the following year. And in 2008, I got laid off with the recession because, mass layoffs, and Sony had to get rid of like half their people. Even though PlayStation was doing very well, they had to sort of make it like a even sort of layoff across the divisions to try not to sort of, make it too sort of controversial, I guess, for like, certain, so like the electronics were doing really badly, but the games were doing really well. And then I thought, well, this will be okay. I'm sure I'll be fine. At that point, I've been working for 20 years in games. I thought, I'll find a job. But I didn't realize how bad it was. And then a few months into it, I was like, wow, this is crazy. Okay, is there anything I want to do while I'm sort of looking for work to sort of keep myself sane, that kind of thing? And then I thought, I always wanted to try acting. I always thought about it as a kid. I was interested in it, but nothing ever happened. I did a nativity play. I'll tell a short version. It's just kind of funny. I did a nativity play when I was 7. And the girl who's in the play with me, I had a big crush on. She was like my first crush. And I was playing the role of Jesus, which is a big role for a first time, right? And I'm wearing the tunic, for the outfit, but it's about a foot too long for me. I'm just a little kid, And we had this little wooden stage, it was about 20 foot wide, polished wooden stage with stairs either side of it. And I run up the stairs to do my first line, super excited, but I trip on my tunic. And I fly and land on my belly, slide across the stage like a seal, went down the other stairs and underneath the principal's chair, who then shouted out, bellowed out in front of the entire audience, all the parents, "Mr. Butler, get out from underneath my chair henceforth." And everyone burst out laughing. And I was nicknamed Flying Jesus for years after that. It's a true story. His name was Mr. Perkis. I remember him very well. And so I jokingly say in interviews, that's the reason why it took me a full, like almost 30 years to actually get the courage to get back into acting again, because it ruined it for me. But no, it's not the truth. No, I just kind of never did it. It just never happened. And got into games very young and enjoyed that, and that was it, But yeah, so I decided to try an acting class. Anyway, I find one on Google. I didn't know anything. Like, what is SAG-AFTRA, acting classes, San Diego, that kind of thing. And the one I found was literally right around the corner from where I got laid off. And I was like, uh-oh, I hope nobody sees me going in there. It's going to be weird, So I drive down there. I go upstairs to this little office where this class is, just to audit it, just to see if it's any good. And I put my hand on the door handle, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is crazy. Time I'm in my mid-30s, and I'm like, oh, this is stupid. What am I doing? I've got a career. This is crazy. So I left. I didn't go in. Drove off for about half a mile, and then I thought, no, you're the type that checks everything out. So I turned around, came back, and that was it. If I hadn't done that, wouldn't have met you, wouldn't have been doing all this crazy stuff. So that's how I got into it. That's the beginning.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So, yeah, growing up, to get into video game, like the artistry of that, were you a very creative kid?
Yeah, I was. I was always doodling at school. I remember that because I was always getting told off for daydreaming. I was either doodling or I was staring out the window, imagining like dragons and spaceships flying around in the sky. I'm still very geeky. I was a very geeky kid, but yeah, that was me. I was always trying to escape somewhere, sort of more interesting,
Were you encouraged by anyone to pursue a more creative career?
There was a little bit of it in my family. So my dad was always very creative. He would often draw like really great drawings, like really nice stuff, like cartoons and things. But it was just for me, and for my sisters later on probably, and just for fun kind of thing. He didn't do that as a career. He owned a printing company. And when I told my mum, my parents are separated, I told my mum about, this games job offer, which I was kind of talent spotted, by the way. I didn't sort of just apply for it. She was all about it, ironically, even though she's not the creative one of my two parents. She's always had very straightforward jobs, receptionists, working at stores and things like that. And my dad was the one that I thought would be all into it. And he was like, oh no, son, that video games, beep, beep, beeps, beep, crap is a fad and it's going to be gone in 2 years. And I was like, I don't know, Dad, I can't like it. It's interesting, And he had admitted to me, years ago, that it's like I was very wrong about that. The games industry thing actually did take off, and it was very good. But yeah, I think I got it a bit from him because he was always like creating stuff. Like he built me a little go-kart out of wood and some wheels from a pram, as we would say, I guess a pushchair or something, or whatever you would say in America.
Stroller,
yeah, stroller. He was always making stuff, and I think I got it from him. Yeah, I was always like creating stuff. Yeah.
And you get talent spotted at 16.
Yeah, so when I was 15, I joined a local computer club because around 11, I got my first computer and I was loving it. And I created my first piece of digital art when I was 11. And it was a goblin walking along with a ball and chain behind him. And I didn't have a paint program at the time, so I did it in code, and I typed out all the little pixels in code in binary, and then made it animate. And the sad thing about it was that I didn't know how to save code because this computer used a cassette recorder to load programs. It's very old. I'm showing my age now.
I know what you're talking about.
You do? Okay, good. I don't feel too bad then. But I didn't know how to save it to cassette. So I had to just enjoy it for a couple of days, and eventually I had to turn it off, and I lost it.
Oh.
But yeah. So a friend that I made when I was about 13 or so, he said, when I was about 15, he said, oh, there's this computer club that's literally across the road from where you live. I mean, literally, you just walk across the road and there it is. And it was at this small sort of local hall, and you bring your computer, you put your computer in a bag, you grab your monitor, you take it across. And you just hang out with other kids that were playing games and, somewhat copying games. But playing games and stuff. And what I would do is I would draw artwork, because now I had a computer at that point when I was 15 where I had a paint program. I could save my stuff, which is great. Revelation is amazing. I would sort of make like mock game graphics, like, made up shoot 'em ups and made up sort of, bosses for games and stuff. And I also, this is the 80s, I also hand painted a copy of Madonna's True Blue album cover with her leather jacket over her shoulders and the Marilyn Monroe haircut and the red lipstick. And I painted that, and he thought I'd scanned it because it looked the same, And I says, no, it's hand painted. I literally put the cassette inlay card on my knee and just kind of kept painting it like this, And he was like, wow, that's really cool. This random guy who came up to me in the club, hadn't met him before. His name was Steve. And he said, do you want a job? And I was like, in games? I was like, I don't know. I work at Safeway. He's behind the register. I don't know anything about that, And he says, yeah, you're really good. We're starting a new company, himself and his partner, Gary. They sort of partnered to start this company. I went home and told my mum, and she was like, oh, I don't know. Is it any good? What's the pay like? Or what sort of thing is it? Where are they at? And yeah, it just sort of started from there.
So cool.
33 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you work still in the gaming industry?
I do. Yeah. There was sort of a gap for a bit. I say sort of because I was still doing freelance work. But when I got laid off from Sony, I hadn't done freelance in the US, and I wasn't particularly that savvy at like where you get it. I didn't know about Craigslist. I didn't know about like these sort of freelancer websites and stuff. So I was still trying to figure it all out. And also, because I'd been an art director and art manager for such a long time, I didn't actually have much new artwork that I'd create myself, because I was the person managing the team and running the team, a lot of administrative stuff, a lot of like approving art, that kind of thing. So it was a bit scary, because I was like, oh my God, my art portfolio is really ancient. I don't know if you play games at all, but like, I think the newest thing I had on there was a game that was big at the time in 97 called Croc, Legend of the Gobos. And it was a PlayStation 1 game with a green crocodile with a backpack jumping around on platforms to save these little orange fuzzy critters. And it was number one for a while, and it did really well. But that was ancient, because that was now, at that point, 11 years old. And in games industry terms, that's a long time, because, graphics get better and better. So, yeah, it was a little daunting. So to answer your question, I did stay in it, but it took me a while to get sort of freelance work. And then once I did, it started getting a bit of momentum, but, it took a little while. And then I didn't get back to a full-time job, and that only lasted 6 months because the company started having problems, until 2013, which is a huge gap, So what I was doing, I was like, acting like hardcore, and then just doing whatever freelance jobs could come along, But the reason I went sort of so crazy about acting once it started off was because I had a lot of people tell me, because I started at 36, I had a lot of people tell me that you're going to have no success. You're starting way too late, way, 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 way too late. You should have been in your teens, your 20s at the worst case, and nothing's going to happen. And I'm really stubborn. When somebody tells me no, I'm like, screw you, I'm going to make this happen. You can beat that out, sorry. I'm from London. I have pretty bad language sometimes. Yeah, I just sort of thought, no, I'm gonna have a go at this. I'm gonna do everything I can, So.
Yeah. Tell me about the mindset shift that you had kind of driving away from your acting class and then coming back. Like, what was that? Do you remember kind of in your what you were thinking?
Yeah, because what I just left was manager of art development at Sony PlayStation. Sounds very fancy.
It does.
But it was just a nice job. And I enjoyed it. And essentially, you're like art director, overseeing a team and running a sort of whole art department. And you're responsible for multi-million-dollar games to some degree. Your team has to come in on time and do everything right, and it falls on you if it doesn't, right? So a lot of responsibility. And I just thought, the acting world, I'm generalizing a bit here, but the acting world, obviously, a lot of people sort of say, ooh, it's a bit of a fool's game. It's difficult. it's crazy, nobody makes any money, 99% of people fail, that kind of stuff, you know. It's very sort of doom and gloom, negative, you know, about it. But the reality is it's actually not like that. It's difficult, yes, but it's not quite that crazy. You know, you've got to work hard to make it work. If you don't put in the effort, then yeah, you'll see very little results, I think. But yeah, to answer your question, I just sort of thought, like, I had this, I hopefully still have this good career, you know, if it continues to go at that time. And will people think this is ridiculous? I wasn't really into social media. I had a Facebook page just to sort of share barbecue pictures with my neighbors. I had like 5 followers on there, but at the time. But you know, I thought, I don't know, because it's, you know, it's a reputation-based industry, and you know, you often get jobs because people you worked with before sort of say, hey, I'm working at this new company and we're looking for somebody interested, you know. And I just was a bit worried about what that would entail, you know, jumping into something so sort of out there as like, film and TV and acting and stuff. But there's more to that I'll tell later on. But there's, you know, especially living in LA and working in games, there's a bit of a different perception because of different cities, right? You know, even though San Diego is only 2 hours south, it's a bit more sort of cozy, calm, sort of more normal.
Okay, yeah. So tell me about that first acting class experience, like walking in there after deciding to come back.
It was nerve-wracking because I was under the impression that I was just there to watch, you know, just sit in the back row as far away from everyone as I can be and just sort of take it in, like, you know, all right, what the class format's like, you know, what the teachers are like, what the students have to do, what they're like, you know, what the actual classroom is like, you know, just to sort of like see what it's all about, you know. The nearest I got to an acting class before that was I went for one day to drama class at school when I was 13, and I was absolutely terrified. You know, all these kids were super confident, like, yes, check me out, I'm amazing. And I was just this little shy kid, like, biting my nails, like, oh no, I'm leaving, I'm out. This is crazy. And it kind of felt a bit like that at this class, to be honest with you, because I walked in there and, you know, I was a little sort of beaten down from the layoff and all that, kind of thinking, oh, what's going to happen here, you know? So I walked in there, and they were very welcoming, very nice, and the teacher was very, very sweet. And he says, "Oh, welcome, Scott." Shook my hand, but I could tell he was an actor. You know, he had that sort of little moustache and the beret, and you know, he was a little sort of larger than life. And I was like, "Oh, interesting." Not sort of met people like this before, you know. And but I come in, everyone's very nice. And I sort of, you know, made sort of small talk with a couple of the actors, you know, sat in front of me who had been at the class for some time. And so he starts the class and he's like, all right, let's have a couple of people come down, do some warm-up exercises, let's do this. And welcome Scott, you know, who's here to check out the class. And I was like, hi, you know. And then later on, he's doing a scene sort of exercise, just like a 1 page or something. And he's having people come down and read it. And then he says, Scott, why don't you come down and give it a go? And I'm like, no. And I start sweating. You know? I'm like, oh my God, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I'm just like, and then everyone turns around, of course, and looks back at you and like, come on, give it a try. And I'm like, oh no. And of course you feel pressured. And then I remember walking down the steps and I was like shaking and quivering. And I grabbed this page and he says, just take your time, do whatever. If you mess up, just go back and try again, and no worries. And by the way, this is an on-camera class. They had 2 or 3 cameras with VHS tapes recording, you know, and you watch it back on this monitor, and people discuss like how people did it, you know. So you get critiqued as well, and I was like, you know, by the students as well, which is crazy. And so I do this thing, and I'm literally just like, it's like a waterfall coming from my head. I had to keep blinking because all the sweat in my eyes was like, you know, the page was shaking, quivering, and I was like doing these lines, and it probably sounded terrible. And but then I got through it, and everyone was like, "Hey, well done," you know, clapping, sort of being very supportive. And the teacher was like, "Great job, all right, very well done. Okay, you can go back and sit down. We'll take a look at the tapes at the end once everyone's done their thing." And I sat down. I was like really, really nervous. I can't even describe how bad it was, but there was something about it that was interesting. it was something, I think partly because it was different. It was something that I'd never done before. And also that it was a way of expressing myself a little bit that I've never done before. Because I always had a lot of sort of like buried things, you know. I think as we all do, we all have a lot of things that we go through in life. And even though the subject matter wasn't something that was about me, you could sort of relate to some of it, and you could sort of like, by expressing it and sort of acting it out a little bit as badly as I did at the time, there was something therapeutic about it, and I enjoyed it. And the other thing too is that while I was at Sony, I often had to do presentations to my team, and I had, at the time, like 17 artists, and I was always terribly nervous about doing presentations, even though I was very confident about the presentation itself, like what we were presenting, why we're doing things, what we're going to do, that kind of stuff. And I sort of realized, I wonder if this acting class thing, if I did carry on with it, would help me with that. And it definitely did. Yeah.
So do you notice any other skills? Like I would think, like, obviously, like the acting class helped with the presentations you had to make in your prior and current career, right? Mm-hmm. Anything else, anything that you've noticed you've brought in from your career in the video game industry into now the film industry?
Yeah, actually recently, last year. I'm jumping forward a heck of a lot now, but this is a very good question. Before the thing last year, which I'll mention in a minute, I did a film. I think it was 2017 with a friend of mine had asked me, if I wanted to be in this film. He was like, "Oh, you're great in this other film. We're having this other film that we're doing, and we need somebody." And it was playing a sort of a really unusual role. I'd always played human characters up until that point. And that sounds strange because, like, well, what else would you play? But this film that I was in wasn't really a human character. I mean, he's humanoid. I mean, obviously it's me in a outfit, but I had a mask on, and you couldn't see any of my facial features, so you had no way of expressing yourself other than through your physical, body and your shape and the way you move and everything. And he's a supernatural character. He's one of 3 characters that are summoned by the devil to pursue this girl, to take her soul. And I found it interesting, and there was 0 lines. Well, no, it's not quite true. There were a couple of lines, but they got taken out and they put like weird sort of creature sounds in instead. They sort of dubbed it, but it did have lines originally. And I remember there was this one scene where, we're setting up, and then they're like, "All right, so you and one of the other masked guys are going to come in on frame, chase this girl, and she's going to say something, and then she's going to duck behind this glass door and then lock it, and then she's going to be talking to you through the door. And you run up to the door, hands on the glass, kind of banging at the door, trying to get in, pulling the door handle, but it's locked. But then you switch from this mode of like sort of having been beaten by her going through the door to then backing up and letting her know that actually we've still got the upper hand." And there was a way that I did this it's just weird because I never sort of done anything like this before, and I just sort of came up with it. I think it might have been sort of slightly inspired by sort of games, and because I've done animation in games too, where the character sort of backed up, again, with a mask on, so you can't do anything with the face. You can't be sort of like, "I got you." You can't do that because it's all covered, But I walk back and I just sort of slowly raise this arm up like this, and then kind of open the finger up like that and pointed. And then she goes, "What?" And then she turns around and one of my other guys is behind her in the same room. And she's like, "Oh shit," and like, "Oh no, I'm not safe," And I sat down after that scene. I just sort of thought that was kind of fun. Very imaginative, very unusual. I like horror movies. This is a horror movie, of course. And I just thought, wow, that was interesting. Then we did some more scenes and I just sort of had fun with it. And anyway, fast forward, a year ago, I booked this really great film called Hypochondriac, which just came out in theaters and VOD. And I submitted for it on Actors Access. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because when you submit on Actors Access, you're just one of tens of thousands, if not more, people submitting for this role. It's like an open call, essentially. Except that you're not actually like an open call. Everyone gets to audition, like America's Got Talent or something. You still have to get accepted to audition. And I didn't get an audition, but I got a phone call from one of the producers, and they says, "Hi, I'm one of the producers on this film, Hypochondriac, you submitted. I see that you've done some mime stuff." And I'd done some mime training at that point, about a year or so before. And I found that fascinating because I thought, maybe I should try seeing what I can do with this sort of like physical performance thing. And so I said, "Yeah, that's right. I have done a bit of that, and it's really fun, and I've sort of done a role like that before." And he said, "Are you available?" And I said, "Yeah." And I wasn't sure if they were like offering it to me on the spot without an audition, and or just they were checking to see my availability, And then I said, "Can I get the director to call you?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. Here's my number. It's obviously the same number. Just give me a call." So the director calls me up, and he's like, "Hi, I just wanted to sort of get to know you and sort of find out what you've been doing, and are you available?" I was like, "Yeah, available." and he says, "All right, great. This is great." And I'm like, "Do you want me to audition? Do you want me to send something?" And he says, "I don't know if we need that." I said, and this is the only time in my acting career that I've ever done this, where he was offering me the job, essentially, and I asked to audition for it, that's never happened before. And it's risky because, you got the job, but then you could lose the job if he doesn't like it, which is weird. But I thought to myself, you know what, this is actually a fairly, to me, large budget production. This is a really great story. This is also a story that's personal to him, the director, writer, producer. It's a story about his life and what he went through, and sort of dramatized based on that. But I felt compelled to do something on tape and send it to them and see if I'm even in the ballpark of what they're looking for. So he said, "Okay." I think he'd never had that before because he'd been working in film quite some time, and I think he'd never had an actor request to do audition for it, even though they booked it. So I went off and I searched in my closet for any kind of mask I had, and I had a silly sort of Halloween mask, like a rubber sort of like a leather face thing with stitches across it. But the reason I put that on was because then it forced me to, because the character has a mask on, it forced me to not rely on my facial expressions. Right? I have to do everything convincingly from, the neck down, but not also with head movement, but not, with facial expressions. So I did this really weird tape. It was 3 minutes shot against this blue backdrop with sort of dramatic lighting of me just making up all sorts of stuff. And I didn't have the script, so I didn't really quite know what the role was, but I just made up a whole bunch of stuff, sort of doing sort of weird sort of twitches and sort of kind of movements and sort of postures and stuff. And I just started thinking to my games career about how I would take a character in a T-pose and then sort of pose them and have them sort of walking along, a bit like my original Goblin from when I was 11 years old, And then just kind of I thought, it's interesting. I never thought about this. Instead of animating a character on a screen, animate yourself. And then I was like, And I did this weird video that honestly, if I showed anybody, they'd be like, "Okay, there's something wrong with you. I think we need to call somebody." I was doing drawing and crawling around on the floor and sniffing and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I sent it to them. And then there was silence for a while, and I was like, shit, I lost it, damn it. But I sort of still felt proud that I decided to do that, And then I can't remember if it was the next day or something, but because it felt like forever. I was like, because when you send something in sort of a bit crazy, you immediately feel like, did I go too far? Did I do too much? Is this a bit weird? Do they think I'm nuts? And then I get the call. And then I said, "So what did you think?" And they're like, "It was really, really creepy." "Is that good?" They were like, "Perfect. It's perfect. You're hired." I was like, "Oh, thank God." So yeah, that role that I did, to explain it, it's a story about a young man's mental breakdown because of something he endured as a kid from his mother, who was also having going through something. And the character that I was playing is a man in a wolf costume. Not supposed to be a wolf, not supposed to be just a man. He's a man in a wolf costume. And he is a hallucination, essentially, in the mind of this young character. And he is tormenting him through his journey throughout the film into a deeper and deeper spiral into mental illness. And it tackles the subject very, very carefully. Yet it has, visual sort of imagery of how that might look to how you feel, right? Sort of putting that on screen of how you feel. So the character I had to play was not just sort of a creature role, but it was also, depicting this character who's being played by Zach Villa. It's himself mirrored, but it's also showing the build-up and the strength and the chaos that eventually ensues over an arc throughout the film of his mental illness getting stronger and stronger and stronger and unattended and left alone and left to grow and becoming more and more of an issue. And so it was a very, very weird role, very challenging and super, super fun. And it's one of those roles that you come back from when you've shot, you finish shooting and you're just still buzzing with energy for like weeks. You can't sleep because you're just sort of like, wow, that was so creative and so interesting,
I think that sounds fantastic. And as an aside, you said it's available for, we can find it now. I'll find it and I'll put some links if people want to see it. It's interesting because I think I have a couple of things that I thought of in my mind. As somebody who learned kind of acting technique during the pandemic, and I took like Second City's improv, like conservatory, all online, where you're acting kind of in this Zoom box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I got into like I'm in an improv group, which we're now in person. And suddenly I have no idea what to do with the rest of my body because we've become so in these little squares. And I think probably as we get older, we become less and less attuned with how our body is moving in space and awareness of the physicality. And so I took a motion capture, like an intro to motion capture class, thinking, sure, motion capture would be really fun to do, but mainly because a lot of it was mask work and not relying on your face. Because, like film and television acting, they want like as still as you could possibly be. It's all in the eyes.
Less is more. Camera sensitive.
Yeah, exactly. Where stuff like this, I find, the film and TV acting can be so invigorating and creatively stimulating and buzzing, like you were saying. But there's really something about when you can get your whole body into a character that is very unique. And I love what you were saying. Like, I feel like I am on a high for days afterwards. After I feel like I can get that physicality.
There's a rush to it. I mean, even with creature performance, which is very sort of in the same world as mocap.
Yeah.
I did mocap class too. Was it Mind's Eye Tribe?
No, it was mocap vaults. We have
I'll have to look that one up. Okay.
Yeah, they're in LA. And I think I don't think I do know. It's Richard Dorton so he does a lot of the characters, but he like a lot of video game stuff, but they have a Toronto studio. And the head is his name is Pascal Langdale. He's great. He does a lot of like Laban and like movement and stuff. It was like fascinating. Fascinating.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a whole new world. I mean of stuff you can learn, but yeah, it's like even with all that stuff, there's still that need for a lot of it to still do less is more. Like it's sort of knowing the full range of what you can do with your body. Like it's very easy in a creature role, like the man in the wolf. I've got a wolf head on with like dripping fangs with blood. I've got a matted fur, like weird mangy sort of costume. I've got like furry claws with like long claws on, you know, like talons and everything. It's very easy to sort of like go, rah, rah, kind of thing, right? Like you would as a kid, right? In Halloween. But, you know, you got to think about what is the character and what does he actually do internally, and let that go from inside out rather than outside in. Don't try to think I need to move my hands around and I need to do this because that's going to look interesting. Otherwise, I think I'm not going to do anything, right? You got to sort of think like, what is it that is going on in this character, and how does that sort of bleed out into his sort of, you know, arms, hands, feet, everything. Like it's not even just hands and feet. It's like your shoulders, you know, your neck and all sorts of stuff. And every part of you needs to be involved to some degree. At least be sort of, even if not every part is involved, it's at least sort of considered. Like you might be like, okay, this character doesn't move their head, but I have thought about it. There's a reason why I'm not going to move the head, but I'm going to move everything else, right? Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe you're like a Cenobite on Hellraiser or something, you know, and it's like he has this sort of like brace around his neck, thus his head wouldn't move, you know, and but I can move with, you know, everything else. There's other things going on which sort of looks creepy because now you've got this sort of almost like disembodied head and this other thing that's going on below, you know. But with the wolf, you know, some of the first things I was trying out. By the way, I met with the director in the park with my mime teacher. Lauren Eric Salm is one of the last students of Marcel Marceau, the famous mime artist. And it was a fascinating day because I was in the park with all these families, like having little picnics and stuff. And there I am crawling around on the floor, like, God, you know, I'm just doing all this shit. I must have freaked out. I'm sure they called the police at some point. I don't know. But the director's standing there, sort of look at me like crawling around the floor. I'm wearing gloves and stuff, so I don't accidentally like hurt my hands with any broken glass or stuff on the grass, you know. And he's sort of like, that's good. You know, he just sort of like, I'll just come up with a bunch of things, and I guess, you know, we'll sort of figure it out. But you know, I was doing sort of small things like sort of, you know, little sort of micro twitches and stuff, and just sort of like thinking about like how that might build up as this sort of the chaos is rumbling inside. We ultimately didn't quite use that, but we sort of let the actions that the character had and the look of the character. There was a couple of costumes. The costume became more chaotic looking, sort of orange glowing eyes, black burnt fur, and all sorts of stuff, you know. So we sort of let that sort of speak for itself and what was going on in the scene. So that we ended up sort of reducing the role down to sort of quite a small amount of movement. But there was one scene in there. I don't want to give it away because people should go see it. But there's a scene in the film which a lot of people have talked about because it's super weird, super bizarre, very dark, and also quite humorous. And it parodies another film. I'm not going to say it because it will give it away. But just watch the movie. You'll when you get to it, you'll be like, oh, that's the scene he's talking about. Without trying to give it away, I interact with the main character, Zach Villa, and the director sort of just said to me, while he's doing this thing, you're sat behind him, interact with him, you know, sort of do what he's doing, join in. But then at some point, you're going to slit his throat. Mm-hmm. And just sort of figure out how to get there, you know, which is, you know, it's a lot of like, you know, weight on me. It's like, all right, I can barely see. I'm looking out through pinholes, you know, in this thing. So I've got very, very small vision. I can't quite see what he's doing or where he's at. I have to kind of look like really specifically at what he's doing to try to see where his hands are and everything else. And at some point, you know, one of the crew is going to push the blood pump to do the, you know, and it's a one take because of course it goes everywhere. It's going to mess all his clothes up and everything. You have to get it perfectly on time. And we spent a whole like hour just setting up without giving away what I was going to do because it was all improvised, but sort of figuring out with the person doing the pump, the VFX specialist, to sort of say, when I get to this point, you know, this is probably when I'm going to do it. But what I said to her, like, how far down the pump handle does it start to come out? And she said about 20% down. So we had to like choreograph this thing where it's like, all right, as I see you grab the handles and I'm already at this position, you pump, I go, right? So that we match timing. And it was extremely heavy, like responsibility. Like if I mess it up, I'm in big trouble. know, and probably take like an hour plus to reset and cost a bunch of money, you know. Thankfully, it went perfect, you know, but the whole improvisation of it was super weird. And I just thought, this is the first time the man in the wolf costume, who sort of mirrors Will's, you know, descent into mental illness, is actually physically sort of touching him. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of merge my character into him, almost like we're sort of making love in a sense. So I had my sort of hands, the claws and talons sort of sliding over his shoulders and sort of working up to his face and sort of like pushing his face over, almost like, you know, we were, you know, making love. And then sort of like that whole sort of contrast and sort of climax of like, this seems sensual and gentle and soft and caring, but then, you know, it sort of jumps to that thing and then surprises everybody and they're like, holy crap, I wasn't seeing that coming, you know. So I did this whole thing, and it was, you know, it's like a minute and a half scene or something. And then when we did the whole thing, and then it was cut. Addison Hyman, the director, came over with his little sort of wireless monitor thing, and he just was jumping up and down. He was like, that was crazy, that was beautiful, I love it. And of course, big sigh of relief, like, oh, okay. And he was like, wow, that was great. Wow. Okay, moving on. And I was like, took the head off, had a drink of water. I was like, hey, you're right, you know, Zach. But it was, that was a rush. And that was actually, I think that might have been the last night. So of course, you know, I couldn't sleep that night. I was like, that's crazy.
I can't wait to see it. That's so, wow, what an experience. It's amazing. Can I ask about, so building up to not just this role, this very physical role, but like kind of where you are now from that initial acting class that you were going to be observing, but then you weren't. What did that look like for you? What classes did you take? What was kind of your path?
Yeah, so back then when I did the class, I of course stuck to the class and decided to keep myself in it and keep going. And I found myself after about probably about 2 months, sort of starting to get a little bit comfortable. You know, I was still very nervous. It was still, you know, terrifying, but I was starting to get control of that nervousness and, you know, learning to use that nervousness in the roles. Like, you know, if you feel a certain way going into an acting role, is there a way I can convert that energy into something good rather than something bad? You know, like maybe the character isn't nervous, but he is scared of something, or he is worried about something, or he really wants something, you know. So I started to learn how to sort of control that energy and use it. And I think I have to be honest. I mean, I was in San Diego for about 2.5 years before I moved to LA doing acting. So I had 2.5 years there. I was the only British actor I ever met in the whole city.
Huh.
Well, I didn't meet myself, but you know, it's like I was the only one I knew of. So I think I was sort of a little bit, I have to be honest, it was a little bit of sort of a different thing for people. So people were like, oh, British guy acting and saying it's interesting, you know, because it's very sort of indie, small film community there, you know. You know, it's quite active. I started to sort of meet a few people, and I found a San Diego filmmakers thing, like meetups, where they have this sort of little building and they meet up, and they people come up and do talks and stuff, and you get to sort of mingle with filmmakers. And you just started to sort of meet a couple of people, and you'd inevitably get 1 or 2 people come up and say, you're interesting. I was actually got this little short film I want to do, and you know, maybe you might be good for the part. I never thought about him being British, but that's interesting. But I'll tell you one thing that was quite near the beginning. This was so in the class, first day, I met this guy, Cody, and we're still friends today. We're still really good friends, and he's a lovely guy. And it was his first day too. So we were like first day buddies, sort of like, we're both nervous. Let's be friends, you know. let's you know, sort of like be scared together, you know. We were very, very, like, after a few weeks, we were very, very sort of excited and extremely naive about this industry. And we both said to each other, "Ooh, wouldn't it be cool to like get like a line on a TV show or a movie, like a feature film, within 1 year of doing this, within 1 year since we started." We said, let's try and do it. Let's try and make it happen, And I actually made both happen, which was interesting. The TV show was one of the first ones. I'll tell you that because it's actually a funny story. And this was one of my very, very first jobs. I got an agent within 3 months of acting. And I didn't know that was actually quite a difficult thing to do. Because I had this sort of guy say, "Oh yeah, I heard about you. You're really great. Do you want to be your agent?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right. It sounds nice." And then he's a nice guy in San Diego. And then I guess at some point I went to class and sort of said, "Oh yeah, I got an agent." They're like, "You got an agent? What the hell?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. Just call me up, And then so he calls me up and he said, "I've got you an acting job." And I said, "But I didn't audition for it." And he goes, "Yeah, it's fine. I talked them into it. You got it." And I was like, "Oh, is that how it works? You just sort of get it?" It's like, and he's like, "Well, not typically, no, but these guys liked you or something." So I'd only done like a couple of student films, I think, before this. That's about it. And so he said, "It's at a restaurant. It's a commercial for the opening of this restaurant, right? It's a local restaurant. It's just about 1.5 miles from you. It couldn't be an easier job for you. And it pays $200 a day, which is kind of good, right?" So I was like, "Yeah." He said, "It's 2 days. And all I know is you're playing a bumbling waiter." And I was like, "Well, that sounds like no acting required because I've never waited a table. I'm going to be terrible at this. So it's perfect. Bumbling is my thing. Yeah." It's on my resume. Special skills, bumbling, So I get there and I'm like, even with my sort of lack of experience at that time, I sort of thought, this doesn't look like a commercial. This looks bigger than a commercial. There's like tons of film trucks and equipment, loads of crew, loads of people. But then I didn't know. I thought maybe it is a commercial. I don't know. And then there's a young girl who's also with, he's her agent too. And he sent her as well. So there's the two of us doing this job. And she's playing waitress, I'm playing bumbling waiter. And the producer comes over and I says, "Hi, I'm Scott. Nice to meet you. I guess I'm, here for the role or whatever." And he says, "Yep, great. Yep, okay, put that apron on, put the shirt on. Look, okay, you're looking good. Perfect." And he's got like his earpiece in and he's sort of running around like crazy, And I sort of tried to ask him, I said, "Just real quick, I don't have like a script or anything, or I don't know what the premise is." And he goes, "I can't talk right now. Sorry, hold on." And he runs off. I didn't see him again. I was like, "Oh, God." And I said to the girl, I said, "I don't know what we're supposed to do. I'm a bit worried, I don't know anything about this." She says, "No, I don't either." And I was like, ugh. And then we're told to like go wait outside the back of the restaurant because they're setting some stuff up. Just go wait outside for a bit, So we go outside and this car turns up and these older women get out. And one of the older women says, "What are you two just doing hanging out here? Why aren't you inside working?" I was like, "We were told to stand out here." We were confused, so confused. She was really angry at us, really mad. I think she thought we were actual waiters and waitresses at the restaurant and weren't, doing our bit, right? Eventually we get brought back in and then the producer says, he grabs us both by the shoulders, kind of walks us over to inside the restaurant itself because we're in like a holding room, and puts us in front, behind the bar, in front of the point of sale system and says, 5 minutes, learn it, go. And one of the waiters like, "Okay, when you ring up a burger, when you ring up a drink, this is what you do. I can't take it in 5 minutes. I'm like, "Oh, this is a lot of stuff to this. Oh, this is confusing, And then I'm trying to like say, "Well, are we supposed to do anything? Like, what are we supposed to do?" Anyway, so then like 5 minutes later, he grabs us again and he puts the girl back in the holding room and he grabs me, grabs my shoulders and pushes me into the restaurant. And I sort of stumble forward and the camera starts following me. And I'm like, okay. And then the producer shouts out, "Go serve some tables." And I'm like, okay. So I start serving some tables. And I'm like, oh, of course, I'm doing a terrible job. I'm getting the drinks wrong. They're late. I don't know what to ask. I can't open a bottle of wine. I had to ask another waiter for a corkscrew, which he got mad about, I don't know what I'm doing. And then there's one bit where the owner of the restaurant, who's this Italian woman, she's really cool, but she's very sort of fiery, got that spirit. And she grabs me, and the camera's on us both, and she says, "You told me in your interview 2 weeks ago that you had loads of experience in restaurants. You are terrible. The drinks are late, the orders are wrong, the customers are upset. And by the way, this is a restaurant full of customers, real customers, like about 150, 200 customers." And on camera, in the moment, it clicked. I was like, this is a reality TV show. I was like, oh, this is making sense. I hadn't really watched much reality TV, but I'd seen like a little bit of Real World or something, I think. And I was like, oh, I think this is a reality TV show. This is not a commercial. This is way too long, way too much stuff. Very sort of dramatic. This is not a commercial for an opening of a restaurant, So in mid-scene, on camera, there must have been this sort of small flicker in my eyes of like, oh, And then I thought, I'm going to have fun with this. And then I went, yeah, I have had experience. I worked at McDonald's for 6 months. I told you that. And she goes, McDonald's? McDonald's? This is a high-end restaurant. What the hell, McDonald's? She got mad at me. And then she sort of, yelled. And then the camera turned away from us and went to go chase someone else. And then she looked at me and she grabbed me by the shoulder and says, "That was great. Do more of that stuff. That was brilliant." And I was like, oh my God. So they had me do things like the producer said, grab this plate of expensive food. There's a little clearing in the middle of the restaurant. Trip and drop it. Smash the plate. And I'm like walking through and I'm like, oh, smash. It's like, holy crap. And then of course I'm like, oh no, what am I? I'm so bumbly, I'm picking up the chicken and stuff. And then she comes over and she's like, what are you doing? Like, it's one thing after another. And it's like, I think the chicken's still good. We could probably like dust it off in the apron and put it back on the thing. And she goes, would you feed your dog chicken off the floor? Says, my dog always eats chicken off the floor. I don't even have a dog, making shit up. And then I went over to the table where the older ladies were at, the one who yelled at me. I found out she's the mother of the owner. She thought I wasn't an actor. She thought I was a waiter. That's why she was mad. And she said, you know what? I kind of like you. You're all right. She's like, yeah, you're not very good at this job. I'm kind of confused how a British guy is waiting a table in San Diego. So I on camera, I came up with a random story. I improvised a story. And I says, well, here's the thing. I'm not really very good at booking things or arranging stuff. I booked a ticket to come visit San Diego, but I accidentally bought a one-way ticket. And now I'm having to earn money to pay for the other half. It doesn't make any sense because you couldn't work or anything. I just came up with this ridiculous story. And I was actually really genuinely hungry because I was out on the floor doing this for hours. And I was actually genuinely hungry. And I found myself looking at this plate of ham, cheese, and crackers. And I must have been licking my lips a bit or something because she said, do you want some? Then I said, and the camera's still on me, and I says, I probably shouldn't. I'm already in enough trouble as it is, and just walked away.
Did you ever watch it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of that footage didn't get used because I think they just decided to go with a different sort of thing. Because they had all sorts of crazy stuff. They had like a whole bus of cheerleaders come in, like, we're hungry, we want to eat. It was all ridiculous. The whole thing was too much.
Insane.
Yeah, but I told my agent, I said that night, I says, did you do this on purpose to like make me look like, sort of like I'm completely confused and bumbling? But I sort of tell him it's a commercial. He goes, no, I really thought it was a commercial. I wasn't trying to like just sort of put you in character or something.
Oh my God.
And so I went back the second day and they said, actually, we got so much good footage of you. We're fine. Take some crafty. You got the 200 for the second day. Just go home.
Yeah.
And I was like, sweet.
Amazing. That's insane. That's an insane story.
Yeah. I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing in my life? This is crazy. But
do you have any... Sorry? Yeah.
No, I was going to say, and then the feature film, just real quick, I got off of Craigslist of all places. I got off of Craigslist. Yeah, it was like tennis umpire needed for film. Pays $100 a day, non-union or whatever. And I went along to this little office. And it did sort of dawn on me that they were probably looking for American accent. And I just thought, oh, Wimbledon, British, So I went in there, I just did these lines, and there was the director sat there, but one of the producers worked on Men in Black. I didn't know until afterwards. Like, holy shit, to me it was massive, And they're all sat there, all these people with all these laptops and things. And I'm just doing the lines like, 15 love, match this, all that kind of stuff. And then I walked away, and I know, I sort of remember thinking they were just staring at me, like sort of like that. Didn't expect like this random British guy to come in, and I ended up booking it. And I thought it was going to be a little pokey film. It wasn't at all. It was huge. It had like 300 background and about 50, 60 crew and trucks everywhere. And when I drove in, I lined up with the extras, not knowing where to line up. And this PA came running over to me and goes, "Are you Scott Butler?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You're not an extra, come with me." Then takes me over to this trailer, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm in a trailer now? What's this? This is weird." Getting makeup put. I never had makeup on before, ever. Putting all this stuff on my face, and I looked in the mirror and I thought, I look like a plastic doll. I look weird, But then, of course, on camera it works, And I just, and they gave me the wrong lines. 5 minutes before I was supposed to shoot all these lines, just me, with 300 background behind me, right?
Oh, jeez.
One of the PAs goes, "Oh my God, we gave you the wrong script. We gave you the wrong lines. Here's the new lines." And all these 300 background are all chatting and stuff, and I'm trying to like be in a bubble and learn all these lines. And I'm terrified, like, oh my God, I got to get this down. This is so crazy. Thankfully, they ran out of daylight. So they ended up shouting out to me, "Scott, we're going to shoot it tomorrow." I was like, oh. But it was a great film. It was originally called Smash, but it got renamed to 16 Love. And it was on Netflix for a long time.
I think I've heard of that. Yeah.
Tennis-based rom-com.
Rom-com, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With Lindsay Shaw.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who might be interested in pursuing acting kind of later on in life or after another job?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things. I mean, one thing I tell a lot of people, and this is also to younger people too, is if you can, try to have your financial situation as far as like money coming in to make you sort of sleep at night and have the bills paid. Try to have that sorted out outside of acting, because even though I've been doing this a long time, money can be very up and down, right? The good thing about that is a number of things. Obviously, you sleep well, right? You feel better, and you sort of feel a bit more sort of like calm and confident that things are okay. But also, when you're going into an audition room, the thing you don't want to do is sort of come off desperate. You don't want to come off like, "Oh God, I really need this gig. This gig pays $300 a day for several days. I really, really need it." Even if the main thing is that you love the role, you love the project, and you are genuinely passionate and interested about the project, if there's still that little part of you that's like, "But I really need the money too," they can smell it a mile off, I think. And when you come into the room, if there's sort of like, "Yeah, let's try it a different way," or, you see anything sort of like a little bit sort of, not sure. If you're sort of like, oh my God, let me try something else. Is there anything you're looking for? It's like, oh, what if I did this and, something else? You just got to sort of be calm and confident, because the problem is that when you do that, I think it shows sort of your nervousness coming out. It shows your sort of insecurity. It shows your sort of like not being calm and present. And I think that they worry about that, because if they book you and you're on set, they don't want you sort of freaking out, like if a take doesn't go very well, or before even doing a take, So there's that. I think for people later in life, just go for it. Just go for it, because anything's possible. I know people that have started it much later than myself. Met a lot of people over the years, and there is a need for everyone at every age. All the way from newborn. I mean, literally, I was watching a show the other day. I think it was House of Dragons.
Yeah.
The newborn baby, and it was like, wow, they got a SAG-AFTRA credit at that age. That's amazing. They're never going to say they started too late. It's like, wow, network credit, and you weren't even like, in diapers yet. It's like, it's crazy. But there's always a need for somebody. And the main thing is, don't give up. Work hard. I know everyone says this, but it really is true. Work hard. Just keep going at it. Don't get, beat down and sort of think, a rejection means I'm bad, because 99% of the time, the rejection, honestly, isn't because you did a bad audition. It's just because they were looking for something a little different. Like, oh, the other character has dark hair. That's going to be a bit confusing. He looks a bit like him. You know, we should go with somebody maybe with lighter hair or different sort of features. Or he reminds me of my ex. I hate my ex. I don't want to employ him. You know, I dated a British guy once. He was awful. You know, you know, just there's a myriad of reasons why you might not get a role. You know, I think, you know, I've been on the opposite side of casting. I've been a reader for casting directors, which is fascinating. I really recommend it to all actors, because you get to see 30, 40 people come in and do the same role. And you really get to see a range of how people come in, not just when they're reading, but also how they come in, how they present themselves, how they sort of, you know, either do or don't light up the room or engage the room. You know, I think, you know, auditions are more about winning the room than winning the role. You know, and I recommend that to anybody of any age. Do that. It's hugely enlightening. You know, I saw everything from the super confident, suave Hollywood slick guys sort of come in. Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, I think I'm good. I got no questions. I think I'm good. You know, kind of doing this whole thing. And the other guy is like, hi, where do you want me to stand? Is this okay? You know, kind of thing. And it's amazing how, like, everyone's different. Sometimes the guy who was nervous is the one who blew it out the park, did an amazing job, just transformed. And sometimes it's the slick guy who's sort of like didn't do a very good job. You know, he's overacting and stuff. And, you know, it's fascinating seeing all those different versions. But just keep at it. You know, I've been doing this 13 years and I've definitely had my fair share of sort of ups and downs. You do have to have a bit of a thick skin. You have to build that up. I really do think so. I think a lot of people that I know who have started acting that I've met, like when they're starting, they oftentimes leave because they can't handle the rejection. They get really beat down when they don't hear something back, you know, or they don't get it. They really thought they got it because they thought they did a good job, and then they don't hear anything. And then it's like, you know, most of this job is rejection. Like, you do 50 auditions and maybe you book one or two if you're lucky, you know, especially when you're doing like union stuff, you know. So, you know, when I started out doing the non-union students and shorts in San Diego, I was booking 1 in 5. And I was like, this is great, you know, this is cool. But of course, once you move to LA, bigger market, more competition, you know, bigger projects, right? You're talking about like real stuff now. That changes. And with self-tapes, it's changed a lot too. With self-tapes, it's weird because I've had more auditions with self-tapes, but I've had a worse ratio of booking because instead of seeing 20 or 30 people, because that takes time to bring them in, come in the room, have the chit chat, do the scene, have the little bit of chit chat at the end, and then leave. They can now go, you know what, let's get 200 tapes for that role now, because we can literally swipe through them. Go, no, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah, no, you know. And so you feel good that you got the audition. You're like, whoa, this is cool. So yeah, you get all these auditions, but then, you know, at the same point, you're now one of a lot more people that got an audition. So the odds are changing, you know. But it's still good to have a shot. I think I still say yes. It's a little bit more sort of difficult to book those tapes, but at least you're getting a shot. Now I know a lot of people are like, well, self tapes are bad. You know, it's you got to be in the room. You sort of win the room. You know, you create a connection. I do agree with that. I think that's a major part of it. But I still think, you know, you can still do something with a self-tape. You can be a little bit creative in your slate, a little bit, you know, sort of show your personality somewhere. And also you get to pick your best take, you know, put that in. So there's pros and cons both ways, I think.
Do you have anything you're looking forward to coming up?
Yeah, a friend of mine that I worked with a long time ago, one of my first films, we've started talking again about doing something. And we have a script that I got sent this week that I'm starting to look at. And we want to kind of start creating some of our own stuff. I think in this industry, you know, you've got to consider at least the idea of making content as well. I think producing is also has a number of benefits because, not only do you get to sort of be a little bit in control and make some stuff yourself, but also you get to learn things on other sides of the set, and I think that's a good thing. I think that the more things that you can get involved in on a set, like, being behind the camera, maybe directing a scene, even if you're just shooting like a 30-second scene with a friend, and then maybe you're doing the sound, maybe you're editing something, you're learning a bit of Adobe Premiere or DaVinci Resolve or something. I try to do a little bit of everything. And I think that you tend to broaden your sort of understanding of how it all works and maybe why, and you get things that click, like, oh, now I sort of understand why that film that I did a couple of years ago, the director seemed a bit stressed out about that one particular thing. And it's like, oh, I kind of understand it now, I think the more you can sort of be clued in as an actor on set and understand like how the jobs work and the weight of them, I think that can be beneficial.
Absolutely. Do you have any final words of wisdom? No pressure.
Have fun.
Yes.
Have fun and don't compare yourself to other actors, even if they're sort of in your age range or type. I did that at the beginning as a mistake. Yeah. There's a guy that I met years ago when I was only like a year into it, and he's very good, very, very good. And he had this role on this massive film, small role in a massive film. And I was like, wow, that's so cool, and his career has exploded since then. I mean, he's known. And, in the early years, I was like, wow, I'm so left behind compared to that. It's like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Because everyone has a different path. And also the path that you think you're going to have more often than not isn't going to be the path you have. You sort of think like, I'm going to be the next Tom Cruise or I'm going to be the next whatever. And the reality is that life and how you mature and grow up and what things you find interesting. Sometimes you find interest in things that you didn't think you would find interesting. And the thing that you thought you'd find interesting, you kind of think, that's kind of boring, Like I'm like, creature performance is cool. That's exciting. I never thought that before, You just don't know where it's going to go. And I think the only way to stay in this business is to try to build up a little bit of thick skin and realize that it's not always your fault that you didn't book it, right? Almost always never. Secondly, enjoy the journey of it and don't worry about the goal. Don't even think about where am I going to be even 6 months or a year. Forget about, the end result. Just think about today. I'll wake up on a weekend and I'm like, I've got the weekend to myself. I don't have much to do. Maybe I'll get this camera set up and got a blue screen. Maybe I'll shoot a scene and I'll like learn how to composite something in the background and put like a background in there and learn about lighting and stuff. And, and just kind of like enjoy that day and see where it takes me. And then if it's good, I'll post it up and somebody might go, that's interesting. And then you make a connection and that leads you to something else, So
I love that.
Enjoy the journey. Have fun.
Enjoy the journey. Yeah.
Thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Scott, for being my guest this week. Everyone, friendly reminder that my charity merchandise fundraiser is still ongoing. I've paired with a wonderful merchandise supplier of things to ensure that the charities that I'm fundraising for, this is a rolling fundraiser, so it will be ongoing till forever and always. So head on over to my merchandise store, www.janetmcmorty.com/store. It's in the show notes below, and check out all the merchandise I have for sale, with 100% of the proceeds going to the 5 charities that me and 4 of my guests have selected. I hope you will all tune in next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye!